Armed police officer, I'm withdrawing your right be here, and you can blame him disrespectful tourist. He had planned this trip for months, poring over travel guides, watching videos, and imagining every detail of his adventure. This was a new place, full of sights and sounds he had never experienced before. The streets were alive with energy. Vendors were calling out to passers-by, selling everything from sweet treats to handmade souvenirs. The scent of fresh bread and spices filled the air, blending with the faint smell of the ocean nearby. It was a vibrant world that seemed to move to its own rhythm, and the tourist was eager to explore every corner of it. He stepped out of the taxi, stretching his legs after the long ride from the airport. His eyes scanned the area with wonder. Everywhere he looked, there were people from all walks of life, each seemingly absorbed in their own world. Some hurried past, focused on their daily routines, while others strolled leisurely, enjoying the warm morning sun. The tourist felt a sense of excitement, a feeling that anything could happen here. He had always been drawn to new experiences, to discovering places that were different from the familiar streets of his hometown. Here, he felt like an explorer stepping into an entirely new chapter of life. He walked toward the main square, a famous landmark known for its historical significance. Tourists from all over the world were already gathered there, snapping photos, chatting in different languages, and admiring the architecture that had stood for centuries. The buildings were a mix of old and new. Ornate carvings on ancient structures stood proudly next to modern cafes and shops. The tourist was fascinated by every detail, the way the sunlight reflected off the stone walls, the intricate patterns on the windows, and the lively atmosphere that seemed to breathe life into the city. He took out his camera, eager to capture memories that he would treasure forever. As he moved through the crowd, he noticed a group of local children playing near a fountain. Their laughter echoed across the square, light and carefree. They were chasing each other, splashing water and shouting excitedly. The tourist smiled, remembering the joy of his own childhood and feeling a sudden connection to these strangers in a faraway land. He knelt down to take a photo, hoping to capture not just the scene but the spirit of happiness that seemed to radiate from the children. They noticed him, waved shyly, and went back to their game, seemingly unbothered by the presence of a stranger. Feeling more confident, the tourist began to explore further. He wandered into narrow streets lined with small shops and cafes. The walls were painted in bright colors, with murals that told stories of the city's past. Shopkeepers called out to him, offering samples of local delicacies or showing handmade crafts. He paused often, curious about everything, asking questions and engaging with people despite the occasional language barrier. Each interaction was a small adventure, a chance to learn something new about the culture and the people who lived there. He was careful to be polite, smiling and using gestures when words failed, but he sometimes forgot that even small actions could carry different meanings in another country. The tourist's excitement grew as he approached a restricted area, a place of historical importance where only certain activities were allowed. He saw signs, but they were in a language he didn't fully understand, and he assumed it was okay to enter as long as he was respectful. He didn't mean any harm. He simply wanted to get a closer look and take photos to remember the experience. With a sense of curiosity, he stepped closer, fascinated by the architecture and the stories that seemed to hang in the air like invisible threads. From his perspective, it was just another part of his adventure, a chance to see something extraordinary. However, his presence did not go unnoticed. A few local residents observed him, frowning slightly at his behavior. They whispered among themselves, concerned that the tourist was not following the rules. In their community, respect for the landmarks and the regulations around them was taken very seriously. These were not just rules for safety. They were traditions and practices that had been passed down through generations. The residents hoped the tourist would understand quickly, but there was a tension in the air, a quiet worry that things might not go smoothly. Nearby, an armed police officer had already noticed the tourist's behavior. The officer had years of experience dealing with similar situations and could sense that a confrontation might be coming if the tourist continued without understanding the rules. From a distance, the officer watched carefully, making sure to remain calm and professional. His job was not to scare people, but to ensure safety and respect for the law. He knew that most tourists were well-meaning, and often, a simple explanation could prevent misunderstandings. Yet, he also knew that sometimes, even good intentions could lead to trouble if boundaries were ignored. The tourist, unaware of the scrutiny, continued to move closer to areas that were off-limits. He took photos, asked questions, and occasionally gestured to friends on video calls, describing the incredible sights around him. He was caught up in his excitement, not realizing that his actions might be seen as disrespectful or intrusive. He thought he was simply enjoying his visit and sharing the experience with others. His focus was on capturing memories, on seeing as much as he could in the limited time he had in the city. Every moment felt precious, and he wanted to hold on to it in the best way he knew, through photographs and videos. The officer decided to approach. Walking calmly but confidently, he made his way toward the tourist, who finally noticed him and stopped mid-step. The officer's presence was noticeable but not intimidating, yet there was an air of authority that could not be ignored. The tourist felt a mix of surprise and curiosity. He had never been approached by law enforcement in this way before, and a small part of him wondered if he had done something wrong. The officer's gaze was steady, professional, and kind, signaling that while there was a potential problem, it could likely be resolved with understanding and cooperation. As they came closer, the officer spoke in a clear, firm voice. He explained that certain areas were restricted and that visitors needed to follow the posted rules for safety and respect for the community. He gestured toward the signs and the boundaries that marked the protected zones. The tourist listened, a little defensively at first. He nodded, but his mind was racing. He didn't fully understand the gravity of the situation. To him, this was just another part of the adventure, a small hurdle to overcome. He thought he could continue exploring without causing any real harm, assuming the officer was only giving a suggestion rather than a firm instruction. But the officer could see that the tourist was not fully grasping the importance of the rules. He decided to be patient, explaining once more why the restrictions were in place. He spoke about the cultural significance of the area, the traditions that locals valued, and the responsibility everyone had to respect these spaces. He was careful to remain calm, knowing that many visitors simply lacked knowledge rather than intent. Yet, he also needed to make sure the tourist understood that continued disregard for the rules could lead to serious consequences. The tourist's curiosity and excitement were still evident, but a small seed of concern had been planted. He realized that perhaps he had been too eager, too caught up in the moment to consider the impact of his actions. He looked around at the people watching, at the children playing, and at the residents whose expressions had grown more serious. He began to understand that visiting another country came with responsibilities, and that respect was not just a formality, but a crucial part of being a guest in someone else's home. Despite the officer's calm approach, the tourist's reactions were mixed. He wanted to continue exploring, but he also wanted to avoid causing offense. He hesitated, unsure of what to do next. This moment marked the beginning of a larger story, one where curiosity, misunderstanding, and cultural differences would collide. It was a lesson in awareness, in paying attention not just to what one sees, but to how actions affect those around them. The tourist stood there, caught between excitement and caution, not yet realizing that this encounter would shape the rest of his visit in unexpected ways. As the morning turned to afternoon, the square remained lively. Street performers entertained crowds, merchants sold their goods, and tourists like him continued to marvel at the city's beauty. But for this young man, the day had taken on a new layer of meaning. He was learning that travel was not just about seeing new places. It was about understanding and respecting the people, the rules, and the culture that made those places unique. And while the adventure was just beginning, the encounter with the armed officer served as a reminder that every step in a foreign land carried responsibility as well as wonder. The young tourist was still processing the officer's words as he stepped back from the restricted area. His heart was racing, partly from excitement, partly from a creeping sense of unease. He had never faced a situation like this before. In his hometown, most rules were suggestions, and misunderstandings could usually be smoothed over with a smile or a polite explanation. But here in this foreign city, things were different. Respect for laws and local customs was not optional, it was essential. He realized this, but at the same time, his curiosity was too strong to simply walk away. There was so much he wanted to see, to photograph, to remember forever. The officer watched him carefully, his eyes calm but attentive. He could see that the tourist didn't fully understand the seriousness of the situation. Still, he remained patient. Experience had taught him that most visitors responded positively when treated with respect and clarity. He did not want to scare the tourist or escalate the situation unnecessarily. His goal was to prevent any harm and ensure that the tourist would leave the area safely and respectfully. He began to explain more clearly, pointing out the boundaries of the restricted zone and the reasons behind them. He spoke about the historical importance of the buildings, the cultural significance of the site, and how even small actions could unintentionally cause damage or offense. The tourist listened, nodding at first, but his mind was scattered. He was fascinated by everything around him, the colors, the sounds, the energy of the city, and he struggled to focus on the officer's words. He had come to this place seeking adventure, wanting to experience as much as possible. The thought of being restricted, even temporarily, felt like a challenge to his freedom. He wanted to explore, to capture every moment with his camera, and to enjoy the city without feeling constrained. Yet he could sense the seriousness in the officer's tone, and a part of him knew that ignoring these warnings could have consequences far beyond a simple misunderstanding. As the officer continued to explain, a small crowd began to gather around. Locals and tourists alike watched the exchange with curiosity. Some whispered quietly to each other, others simply observed. The atmosphere grew tense, but it was a quiet tension, more like the calm before a storm than anything violent. The tourist became aware of the eyes on him, the silent judgment of the crowd, and he felt a mix of embarrassment and defensiveness. He wanted to explain himself, to insist that he meant no harm, but the words seemed to falter before they reached his lips. He realized, perhaps for the first time, that travel was not just about seeing new places. It was also about understanding how one's actions affected others. Feeling both nervous and determined, the tourist attempted to explain. He spoke quickly, gesturing toward his camera and the surrounding area. "I just wanted to take pictures," he said, trying to sound friendly and cooperative. "I didn't know I wasn't allowed here." His words were honest, and they reflected his genuine intentions. He had not come to cause trouble, only to experience something new and beautiful. Yet the officer did not immediately relax. His job required him to ensure compliance, not simply accept apologies. He nodded slowly, acknowledging the tourist's explanation, but he also knew that words alone would not prevent further issues. The officer decided to take a slightly firmer approach. He stepped closer, maintaining a respectful distance, and repeated the rules more clearly. He emphasized that the restricted area was off-limits, not because visitors were unwelcome, but because the site needed protection and respect. He explained that the local community relied on these rules to preserve their culture and heritage. Ignoring them could lead to damage, misunderstandings, or even legal trouble. The tourist listened, this time with more focus. He began to understand that his actions, even if unintentional, could have consequences that went far beyond his personal experience. Despite this, the tourist's curiosity continued to pull him forward. He glanced around at the intricate architecture, the beautiful carvings, and the vibrant colors that surrounded him. Every detail seemed worth capturing, every angle worth photographing. He felt torn between obeying the rules and fulfilling his desire to explore. His internal conflict grew as he weighed the excitement of discovery against the possibility of getting into serious trouble. He wanted to be respectful, but he also didn't want to miss the chance to experience something extraordinary. It was a moment of tension, a test of patience and judgment that would shape the rest of his visit. Sensing the tourist's hesitation, the officer remained calm but vigilant. He knew that some visitors could be easily confused or overwhelmed in unfamiliar surroundings. He decided to give a clear but simple instruction. If the tourist wanted to continue exploring, he needed to step back and stay in the permitted areas. This was not a suggestion, it was a necessary boundary. The officer explained it gently, hoping to prevent further misunderstandings. He also reminded the tourist that cooperation would make the rest of his visit much more enjoyable and safe. There was an underlying message: respect the rules and the city would welcome you, ignore them and the consequences could be serious. The tourist took a deep breath. He looked around at the people observing the situation, the officer standing patiently, and the signs that clearly marked the restricted area. Slowly, he began to understand that he had overstepped, not out of malice, but out of ignorance. He realized that being a visitor in a foreign land came with responsibilities he had not fully considered. He nodded to the officer, signaling his willingness to follow the instructions. At the same time, he felt a pang of frustration. He did not want to be limited, but he also did not want to disrespect the local rules or cause harm. As he stepped back, the officer continued to watch him closely, ensuring that the tourist did not make any further mistakes. The crowd remained quiet, observing the interaction with interest. Some people whispered about the importance of following rules, while others seemed to appreciate the officer's patience and professionalism. The atmosphere was tense but controlled, a delicate balance between curiosity, caution, and authority. The tourist felt a mixture of relief and nervousness. He had avoided immediate trouble, but he knew that he needed to adjust his behavior for the rest of his visit. This was a lesson he would not forget anytime soon. Despite the warning, the tourist could not fully let go of his desire to explore. He wandered through nearby streets, careful to stay within permitted areas. He observed the vibrant markets, the busy cafes, and the narrow alleys filled with history. Every step was a reminder that travel was more than sightseeing. It was about awareness, respect, and understanding. He took photos cautiously, mindful of boundaries and the people around him. He began to appreciate the city not just for its beauty, but for the care and rules that allowed it to remain vibrant and safe for everyone. He realized that following instructions could actually enhance his experience rather than limit it. Throughout the afternoon, the officer continued to monitor the tourist from a distance. He did not interfere unnecessarily, allowing the young visitor to enjoy the city while still ensuring safety and compliance. This balance was crucial. Visitors needed freedom to explore, but they also needed guidance to avoid unintentional mistakes. The officer's presence was both reassuring and authoritative, a reminder that rules existed not to punish, but to protect. The tourist began to notice this, slowly gaining a sense of trust in the officer's intentions. He understood that the rules were not arbitrary. They were a part of the city's identity and culture. As the day wore on, the tourist's initial excitement began to evolve into a deeper understanding of his surroundings. He reflected on the encounter with the officer and the reactions of the people nearby. He realized that travel was not just about what one could see, but how one could act responsibly. Every choice, every step carried meaning. He thought about the children playing near the fountain earlier, the shopkeepers who had welcomed him, and the residents who had watched silently. He understood that his actions affected more than just himself. They impacted the entire community. This awareness began to shape his behavior, guiding him toward a more respectful and mindful approach to exploration. By late afternoon, the tourist had adjusted his plans. He focused on areas clearly open to visitors, enjoying the city's beauty while respecting the boundaries. He began to notice details he might have missed before: the expressions of local artisans, the quiet charm of hidden courtyards, the rhythm of daily life that continued around him. The experience became richer, not limited by restrictions, but enhanced by the understanding of responsibility and respect. He took photos carefully, asked permission when needed, and engaged with locals politely and attentively. The lessons from the morning encounter stayed with him, shaping every interaction and observation. The sun began to set, casting warm golden light across the city. The streets glowed with a soft radiance, and the tourist paused to take in the scene. He reflected on the day's events, recognizing the growth in his awareness and understanding. The encounter with the officer had been challenging, but it had also been educational. He realized that respect, patience, and attentiveness were essential companions to curiosity and adventure. He felt grateful for the lesson, knowing that it would allow him to continue exploring safely and respectfully. It was a moment of reflection, marking the transition from naive enthusiasm to mindful exploration. As night approached, the tourist returned to his accommodations, tired but thoughtful. He reviewed the photos he had taken, remembering not only the sights but also the experiences and lessons of the day. He understood that travel was a balance between curiosity and caution, excitement and respect. The encounter with the armed officer had been more than a warning. It had been a guide, shaping his perspective and helping him navigate the city responsibly. He felt a sense of accomplishment, not for the places he had visited, but for the awareness he had gained and the respect he had learned to show. The next morning, the tourist woke up feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. After the events of the previous day, he knew he had to be more careful. He reminded himself to follow the rules, respect the local culture, and observe boundaries carefully. But at the same time, his curiosity was stronger than ever. He had traveled so far, and there was still so much to see. Every corner of the city seemed full of stories waiting to be discovered, every street full of experiences he could capture. He wanted to make the most of his time, but he also knew that this required balance between adventure and responsibility. After breakfast, he set out once again, wandering through streets that seemed quieter than the busy main square. Early in the day, there were fewer tourists, and the local shops were just opening. The air was crisp, and the city had a peaceful energy that allowed him to take in the details without feeling rushed. He noticed the sound of birds, the soft hum of street vendors preparing for the day, and the gentle chatter of neighbors greeting each other. These small details made him feel connected to the city in a new way. He understood that travel was not only about seeing famous landmarks, but also about observing daily life and appreciating the rhythm of the people who lived there. As he walked, he found himself approaching an area near the landmark from the previous day. His heart skipped a beat. He remembered the armed officer's warning clearly. He knew he should avoid this area entirely, yet part of him wanted to take just a quick look to see if he could understand it better from a safe distance. He told himself that he would be careful, that he would stay within the boundaries and follow the rules strictly. With this thought, he slowly moved forward, trying to keep a safe distance from the restricted zones. Yet his excitement made him a little careless. He did not notice a small path leading closer to the restricted area, and before he realized it, he was much closer than he intended. The armed officer, who had been observing the square from a distance, noticed immediately. His trained eyes recognized the tourist's hesitation and curiosity. He could see that the young man's excitement was pulling him toward the restricted area again. The officer knew this situation could escalate quickly if not addressed carefully. He walked toward the tourist, maintaining calm and professionalism. From experience, he understood that visitors often acted out of curiosity, not malice, and that the right approach could prevent misunderstandings. He kept his tone firm but polite, ready to explain the rules once more if necessary. The tourist noticed the officer approaching and felt a wave of anxiety. He knew he was close to making a mistake, yet his curiosity still pushed him forward. He tried to step back subtly, but in his nervousness, he moved in a direction that brought him even closer to the restricted zone. The officer stopped a few feet away, making his presence clear but not threatening. "Sir," he said calmly, "you are entering a restricted area. Please step back immediately." His voice carried authority, but also patience. He wanted the tourist to understand, not to feel scared. Yet the young man's excitement and confusion made him slow to respond. I'm just trying to get a better view," the tourist said quickly, raising his hands slightly in a gesture of explanation. "I didn't mean to cause trouble. I'll move back." His voice betrayed both fear and eagerness. He truly did not want to disrespect the rules, but the beauty of the area and his desire to see it up close were hard to resist. He took another step forward without realizing it, his camera ready to capture a photo. The officer noticed instantly and raised a hand gently but firmly, signaling him to stop. The situation became tense. The officer explained once more, this time emphasizing the seriousness of the rules. "Sir, these areas are protected for a reason," he said. "It is not only about safety, it is about respecting history and culture. You must stay behind the boundary. If you continue, I will have to take further action." The officer's words were measured but firm. He wanted to prevent any harm and ensure that the tourist understood the consequences of ignoring the instructions. At the same time, he remained calm, aware that any sudden action could startle or upset the visitor. The tourist froze, suddenly aware of the seriousness of the situation. His excitement faded into worry. He glanced around, noticing that locals were watching, some with curiosity, some with concern. He felt the weight of responsibility for the first time. He understood that this was no longer just a matter of curiosity or adventure. It was about following rules that mattered to the community. The beauty of the city and the landmark now felt even more significant, not just because of what he could see, but because of the care taken to preserve it. He wanted to do the right thing, but his nervousness made it hard to act immediately. The officer gave him a final warning, calmly but clearly. "Sir, you must step back now. If you do not, I will have to withdraw your right to be here." The words were not threats, they were a statement of authority. The officer had been patient, and now he had to make sure the rules were enforced. The tourist understood, but in his anxiety and excitement, he hesitated. He wanted to comply, but his curiosity and eagerness caused him to pause, caught between obeying the rules and satisfying his desire to explore. The crowd around them watched silently, sensing the tension. No one spoke, but everyone could feel the moment's importance. The tourist realized that he was being observed not only by the officer, but also by locals and fellow travelers. This realization added to his anxiety, and he knew that any wrong move could have consequences. He took a deep breath, trying to calm himself. He reminded himself that he had a choice: to respect the rules and continue enjoying his visit safely, or to ignore them and face potential consequences. It was a moment of decision that would shape the rest of his experience in the city. Finally, the tourist stepped back, slowly and carefully. He raised his hands slightly, a gesture of compliance and understanding. "I understand," he said quietly, his voice filled with relief. "I will stay back." The officer nodded, acknowledging the tourist's compliance, but he remained alert. He knew that compliance in word did not always guarantee compliance in action, and he kept a watchful eye on the young man as he moved to a safe distance. The tourist felt a mixture of relief and embarrassment, but also a growing sense of respect for the officer and the rules he represented. The officer decided to give the tourist a moment to recover. He did not approach aggressively but stayed nearby, ensuring that the young man remained within the permitted area. "Thank you for understanding," the officer said. "If you follow the rules, you can enjoy the city safely." The words were calm but carried authority. The tourist nodded again, realizing that his actions had consequences beyond what he had imagined. He understood that respect, awareness, and patience were essential companions to curiosity and exploration. As the morning turned into afternoon, the tourist adjusted his approach. He explored the city more carefully, paying attention to signs, boundaries, and local guidance. He asked questions politely, observed the behavior of locals, and took photos only where it was clearly allowed. Each step was now guided by a sense of responsibility. The beauty of the city was still captivating, but now he appreciated it in a new way, through the lens of respect and awareness. He realized that following rules did not diminish his adventure. Instead, it enriched it, allowing him to experience the city safely and meaningfully. Despite this, he could not shake the memory of the earlier tension. He reflected on how close he had been to causing serious trouble, and he felt a mixture of gratitude and caution. The officer's calm but firm approach had prevented a negative outcome, and the tourist realized the importance of authority figures in maintaining safety and respect. He thought about how different the situation might have been if the officer had reacted with anger or frustration, and he felt fortunate that patience and professionalism had guided the encounter. As evening approached, the tourist continued to explore, now more mindful of his surroundings. He noticed small details that he had overlooked before: the quiet dedication of shopkeepers, the careful upkeep of historical buildings, the attentiveness of local guides. Each observation reinforced his understanding that the city's charm and beauty were the results of care, effort, and respect. He began to appreciate not just the sights, but the systems and people that made those sights possible. It was a lesson in mindfulness and responsibility, one that he would carry with him throughout his travels. By the time the sun began to set, the tourist had transformed his approach to exploration. He was still curious, still eager to experience new things, but now he paired that curiosity with awareness and respect. He reflected on the morning's confrontation and understood that the encounter with the officer had been a turning point. It was not a punishment, but a lesson, one that taught him how to navigate unfamiliar environments safely and respectfully. He felt a deep sense of gratitude for the guidance he had received and a renewed commitment to acting responsibly as he continued his journey. As night fell, the city lights illuminated the streets, casting a warm glow over the buildings and pathways. The tourist walked slowly, taking in the beauty while remaining mindful of boundaries. He had learned that adventure and respect could coexist, that curiosity could be balanced with responsibility. The encounter with the officer had been a challenge, but it had also been an opportunity, a chance to grow, to learn, and to experience the city in a meaningful way. The young man knew that the lessons of the day would stay with him, shaping not just this trip, but his approach to travel in the future. The next morning, the tourist woke up feeling a mix of relief and determination. The previous day had been a wake-up call, teaching him the importance of respect, patience, and awareness while traveling in a foreign city. He remembered the tension, the warnings, and the calm authority of the officer who had guided him. The memory was vivid, and it had left a lasting impression. Today, he promised himself he would explore responsibly, appreciating the city not just for its beauty, but for the culture, history, and people that made it unique. After a light breakfast, he stepped out into the city, noticing how different it felt from yesterday. The streets were lively but not chaotic, and the morning sunlight made the colors of the buildings glow softly. The sounds of vendors opening their shops, the hum of traffic, and the chatter of locals created a rhythm he had not noticed before. Today, he moved slowly, taking time to observe everything around him, not just to capture it with his camera, but to truly understand it. He began to feel more connected to the city, more aware of the delicate balance between curiosity and respect. As he wandered through a familiar area, he saw the armed officer at a distance, observing the square. Their eyes met briefly, and the officer gave a small nod, acknowledging his presence. The tourist felt a mix of gratitude and nervousness. He realized how fortunate he had been that the encounter had ended peacefully. The officer had acted professionally and patiently, ensuring that he learned a valuable lesson without fear or confrontation. That moment of acknowledgement strengthened the tourist's determination to act responsibly. He continued to explore, now paying close attention to signs and boundaries. He asked shopkeepers for permission before taking photos, admired local crafts without touching them unnecessarily, and followed marked pathways carefully. Each interaction reinforced his understanding of respect. He realized that following rules did not limit his adventure, it enriched it. By acting mindfully, he was able to appreciate the city more deeply, noticing details he had overlooked before. The subtle designs carved into stone walls, the way sunlight reflected on colorful windows, and the gentle smiles of locals who appreciated his politeness. Around mid-morning, he approached a popular cultural site. It was an area known for its historical significance, and visitors were only allowed in certain sections. The tourist felt a small thrill. This was exactly the kind of place he had dreamed of exploring. But now, instead of rushing forward, he paused at the entrance, reading all the signs and observing the boundaries. He reminded himself of the officer's warning, respect the rules, and you can enjoy the experience fully. Taking a deep breath, he followed the instructions, entering the area slowly and carefully, camera in hand, ready to capture the beauty while staying mindful. Inside, he found the site even more breathtaking than he had imagined. The architecture was intricate, with delicate carvings and patterns that told stories of centuries past. He noticed the way the walls seemed to carry history in every detail, the way light and shadow played across the surfaces, and the quiet reverence in the air. Other visitors were present, some taking photos, others simply observing. The tourist moved respectfully, careful not to disturb anyone or cross boundaries. For the first time, he realized that his enjoyment of a place could coexist with the respect and care that the community expected. As he explored, he met a local guide who offered to share stories about the site. The tourist listened eagerly, fascinated by the tales of the people who had lived and worked there long ago. He asked thoughtful questions and listened attentively, learning not only about the architecture and history, but also about the values and traditions that had shaped the community. The guide smiled at his interest, appreciating the tourist's polite and respectful attitude. The experience was richer than any he had imagined, and he understood that respecting rules and boundaries had allowed him to engage more meaningfully with the culture. By afternoon, the tourist had moved on to a market known for its handmade crafts. He had learned from previous mistakes and approached vendors politely, asking permission before photographing their work. He noticed small details he had overlooked before, the careful weaving of fabrics, the delicate painting on pottery, and the pride with which artisans displayed their creations. The vendor he spoke to shared a story about how these crafts had been passed down through generations, and the tourist listened with genuine interest and respect. He realized that every interaction, no matter how small, carried meaning. By acting responsibly, he was building connections, learning lessons, and creating memories that would last a lifetime. While exploring the market, he overheard other tourists discussing yesterday's incident near the restricted area. They speculated about what had happened, some curious, others judgmental. The tourist felt a mixture of embarrassment and reflection. He realized how visible his actions had been and how easily misunderstandings could spread. But instead of feeling discouraged, he felt grateful for the lesson he had learned. He knew that he had a responsibility not only to himself, but also to the community and fellow visitors. Every choice mattered, and the awareness he had gained would guide him for the rest of his travels. Later in the afternoon, he returned to the square near the restricted area, but this time he stayed well within the boundaries. From a distance, he observed the beauty of the landmark, the flow of people, and the care taken to preserve the site. He felt a sense of appreciation that was deeper than before. He understood that respecting limits could enhance one's experience rather than diminish it. By keeping distance and following rules, he could observe, learn, and enjoy without causing harm or creating tension. The city's charm was not just in its sights, but in the respect and cooperation that allowed it to remain vibrant and alive. As evening approached, the tourist paused near a quiet cafe to rest and reflect. He sipped a warm drink and thought about the past 2 days, the excitement, the tension, the confrontation, and the lessons he had learned. He realized that the encounter with the officer had been transformative. It had taught him patience, awareness, and the importance of respecting boundaries. It had shown him that rules were not obstacles, but guides that made his adventure safer, richer, and more meaningful. He smiled to himself, feeling a sense of growth and accomplishment. The officer passed by the cafe later and the tourist noticed him again. Their eyes met, and the officer gave a small nod as if to say, "You are doing well." The tourist felt a warm sense of gratitude. He had learned that authority figures, when patient and professional, could be invaluable teachers. They ensured safety, preserved culture, and guided visitors toward responsible behavior. The tourist realized that this lesson went beyond one encounter. It was a principle he could carry into every new experience, every new city, and every new country he visited. As night fell, the city transformed under the glow of streetlights. The tourist walked slowly through quiet streets, reflecting on the day's experiences. He noticed families returning home, shopkeepers closing their stores, and the gentle rhythm of life winding down. He felt a deep sense of respect and connection to the city. The lessons he had learned, about awareness, patience, and respect, had become part of his perspective. Travel was no longer just about seeing new places. It was about understanding, appreciating, and honoring the world he stepped into. By the end of the evening, the tourist returned to his accommodation, tired but filled with a sense of fulfillment. He reviewed the photos he had taken throughout the day, smiling at the memories captured in each frame. But he realized that the most important memories were not just in the images. They were in the lessons, the reflections, and the experiences he had gained. The encounter with the armed officer had been a pivotal moment, teaching him that respect and curiosity could coexist, and that the best adventures were those where awareness and care guided exploration. Over the next few days, the tourist continued to explore the city with a renewed sense of responsibility. He discovered hidden alleys, quiet gardens, and local eateries, always mindful of rules and respectful of the people around him. Each day reinforced the lessons he had learned. Curiosity was valuable, but so was awareness. Adventure was exciting, but so was responsibility. By balancing these principles, he was able to enjoy the city fully, creating experiences that were meaningful, safe, and respectful. As his trip drew to a close, the tourist reflected on how much he had grown. He had arrived full of excitement and curiosity, but also a little naivety. The encounter with the armed officer had been a turning point, shaping his perspective and guiding his actions. He had learned that respect was not just about following rules. It was about understanding, empathy, and care for the world and the people in it. He felt grateful for the lesson, knowing it would guide him in all future travels and experiences. On his final day, he visited the landmark one last time, standing at a safe distance and observing the beauty he had grown to appreciate. The sun set in golden hues, casting long shadows across the streets and buildings. He felt a sense of peace, fulfillment, and gratitude. The city had taught him more than he had expected, not just about its history and culture, but about the importance of respect, awareness, and responsibility. He smiled, knowing that this journey had been transformative and that the lessons he had learned would remain with him forever. As he boarded the taxi to the airport, he looked back at the city one last time. The streets, the people, the landmarks, and even the memories of tension with the officer, all of it formed a tapestry of experiences that he would never forget. He realized that travel was not just about seeing new places. It was about learning how to navigate them with care, respect, and understanding. And with that thought, he felt ready for the next adventure, carrying with him the wisdom and awareness that had been forged in this city during these unforgettable days.